Since studying here at King's over 15 years ago, I've spent most of my career building video games. In April of this year, however, my friend Will Martin and I co-founded a technology-based forestry startup called Woods Camp. Woods Camp is a platform for the management and coordination of timber resources. Much of the world's forest industry depends on wood from small family-owned woodlots that are part of a massively complex and fragmented supply chain. The complexity used to be managed through personal relationships and communities. Landowners and mill owners would be in the same church or lodge as each other, and when a landowner spent a couple of weeks in the winter cutting 50 to 1,000 cord of wood, they knew where to send it. And the mills knew it was coming. We're in the middle of a massive generational cohort shift, a massive tip that is currently underway. The next generation is inheriting these properties, and they tend to live in the city. They don't know really how to work in the woods. That was Dad's job. And they definitely don't depend on their land as a primary source of income. Likewise, the next generation of mill owners no longer have 40 years of relationships to draw on for the wood they need to keep their business running at full capacity. Add to this the higher cost structure of mechanized harvesting, and the consequence is that when a property does become available, the frequent behavior is to liquidate the resource of a landowner who doesn't know what their property is worth, or, not infrequently, does know and simply wants to cash out. A growing number of landowners refuse to accept those outcomes and simply refuse to participate in the market. Consequently, more of the forest resource than ever before remains locked up behind the farm gate, further exacerbating the behavior on lots that do come on the market for harvest. At Woods Camp, we're leveraging existing and emerging technologies to build a platform to get the right wood from the right forests in the right quantities to the right markets at the right time. The stakes are high, and the condition of the forests that our grandchildren will walk in depends on our ability to innovate in our lifetimes. Standing on the outside and advocating for someone else to solve these problems is just not good enough. I don't care if you're an NGO or the Department of Natural Resources. These complex and intractable problems are only solved by climbing down into the arena and getting into the shit. At the Forefront Atlantic Conference, hosted by Dr. Cooper and Chancellor Lynch a couple of years ago, Governor General David Johnston challenged the room to integrate innovations from around the globe and working from our region's comparative advantage to come up with new products and services that we can sell back to the rest of the world. We do have domains of comparative advantage in our region. They are not, however, easy problem spaces. But solving these kinds of problems is harder still from rural communities where the consequence of failure is huge. In a city, if my startup fails, chances are I can just walk across the road to another startup or find safe harbor in an established company that'll benefit from my experience and learnings. In the country, failure may mean that I have to pack up my family and move away for good. So, given that 90% of startups don't find product market fit needed to survive, it stands to reason that we see more bunts than grand slams in rural contexts. The paradox, however, is that many of these domains in which we have a comparative advantage as a region can't be seen from an urban context. This is old hat to those of us in the startup community, but I want to share it with you. Steve Blank, the godfather of the lean startup movement, said, "A startup is not a small version of a big company. Big companies execute against a known business model. A startup is described as a temporary human institution designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. Its primary activity is to search. In the course of searching, there will be spectacular successes, but there will also be spectacular failures. If there aren't spectacular failures, we aren't being ambitious enough. But the consequences of not solving the problems are catastrophic." Much of our landscape looks like this now. We leave seed trees and wildlife clumps to meet regulations such as they are. But if we're honest, the value has been extracted from this landscape. The nutrients have been leached from the soil, and the animals have left the forest in search of less risky and more productive habitat. To me, this is a perfect metaphor for our starting point as we build our startup community in Atlantic Canada. Over time, our goal is to reestablish pockets that look like this. a canopy of established growth that creates the conditions for naturally regenerating shade-tolerant, late-succession, long-lived species. These pockets are still rife with failure and death. Nobody can tell me today which of those young trees will be the one that's still alive in 300 years. But the deadwood, the ungerminated seeds, the carcasses, continue to nourish the soil and create the conditions for the next generation of high-value trees. But the intervening years will be messy. They won't be beautiful forests that look like parks. They'll look like jungles of early succession species that grow quickly and die quickly. In so doing, they will reestablish the nutrients in the soil and the habitat that will create the conditions for the next generation of longer-lived species. We've been in a challenging conversation the last couple of years around how we welcome immigrants into our communities. I'd suggest we're also due to begin another conversation around how we welcome and host entrepreneurs who have the audacity to try and risk and fail. I ask you to respond to these failures not by vilifying, not by chasing them out of town, not by shaming, but by asking, what did you learn? What's next? And perhaps most importantly, how can I help you with safe harbor while you recover? We need more startups and more founders of startups. We don't all have the capacity to become founders with the audacity to risk failure, but we all have the capacity to encourage those who have learned from failed experiments to share that learning, and as they courageously get up off the deck, to help brush them off and enlist them to try again. Thank you.